You mentioned a few other games, like the Bobby Fischer games, the candidates match, the game of the century, which I feel like is a weird game to call the game of the century when there's still like a few decades left in the century. But yeah,
I mean, it wasn't an official thing. It was just the chess journalist
on a chess article.
but it's stuck if you look on
it
again
did
Wikipedia.
stick.
This is
It
all
did
I do
stick.
research wise, because that particular one was a 13-year-old Fisher, and he did a queen sacrifice. I wonder, there's that movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. Was that related? Because didn't they have a young somebody who's supposed to be kind of like Bobby Fischer, played by Josh Waitzkin?
Yeah, I think he ended up being an international master. It wasn't based on Bobby Fischer, it was based on another player, but I liked how they told it through the lens of being inspired by Bobby Fischer.
Do you remember that game? Like, why do you think it was dubbed the game of the century? Was it just journalists being like...
I think part of it was the atmosphere where you have the U.S. junior champion who's this 13-year-old nobody, and it's the first time he's playing in a very competitive landscape against some of the top American players. And he goes up against an international master, so somebody who's a lot stronger than he is, who's played in, Olympiads for the American team. He's having a bad tournament, but then he has this one game where he just shows off his tactical prowess and plays incredibly well. And I don't know if this is true, but in the paper clippings of it, they'd say things like grandmasters were by the board, and they would say things like, oh, Bobby is lost in this position. What is he doing? But there's this 13-year-old kid who's just playing incredibly well. And then that also happened before Bobby's started really rapidly improving at chess. Not that people knew that, but he kind of seemed like a rising star. So I think the game was beautiful, but I also think the idea of a 13-year-old kid coming out from nowhere and beating a top American player was very fascinating.
And there was aggressive chess, and it was and the interesting ideas.
Yep.
Taking big risks. It's cool to see a 13-year-old do that.
Yeah.
What about you mentioned that his match against Mark Taimanov from their 71 candidates match was interesting in some way. Why is it interesting to you? Move 45. I'm looking at some notes.
This is with the bishop e3. I think I know which one you're talking about. I wouldn't say a lot of these games on these lists I think are really great combinations that when tactics come into play, which is what we we're talking about, but they're very good at exemplifying lessons. This is why you study famous games, so you can apply these lessons to your own games. And I think the main takeaway for this one was they were punishing their opponent from steering away from opening principles, which is something that we learned a little earlier, where he delayed the development of his king and put his queen out a little bit too exposed. So Bobby Fischer immediately punished that. And then there was just like a beautiful combination where it was like a 12 in a row perfect moves, which was a tactic, just winning the game. But it only came from punishing those mistakes.
The mistake being bringing the queen out?
Bringing the queen out and, not castling your king right away. Okay. And these were just like opening principles that now they're written in books. But for books, you would study these principles by studying games.
And also, I'm looking at some notes. His dominance during the candidates tournament was unprecedented. He swept 2 top grandmasters. I mean, that guy's meteoric rise is incredible. It's sad that I think in his 20s, he then quit chess. One has to wonder where he could have gone.
Yeah, it is sad that we lost such a brilliant mind so early on. And it's also sad, I think, kind of what ended up happening in his life and the slowly going crazier.